those of you that are the type that always have questions, we love questions on Voices from the Field. So if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. There are two options. So it should be on the bottom of your screen. We'll also be opening up the lines for like the last 10 to 15 minutes where you have the option to raise your hand if you'd like to ask the question live, and we'll be taking those questions that were chatted in the order that they were received. With that being said, any questions or comments along the presentation, feel free to drop them in the comment box. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Thomas Maffei from Innovate Public Schools to get started. Thank you so much for joining us, Thomas.
Great. Thank you, Donna. Thanks to the folks at New Profit, and thanks for everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Thomas Maffei. I am our Director of Research and Policy here at Innovate Public Schools. And I am also a former special education teacher. I taught in several different settings, both in a self-contained resource room as well as in a full inclusion general education classroom at a large public high school. So I'm excited to share with you all today our new Advocate's Guide to Transforming Special Education. And I'll be joined shortly by my colleague Alicia Ross, who will be able to speak a little bit more to our parent organizing efforts, specifically in San Jose Unified. So just a little bit more on my background, and then we'll dive into how the Advocate's Guide came to be. We'll learn a little bit more about the structure of it and how our parents are actually using it in the field. So after leaving the classroom, I moved into several different district leadership positions, first in New York City Department of Education, and later in Boston Public Schools, where I led the launch of a district-run alternative certification teacher preparation program focused specifically on preparing new teachers certified in special education, which was one of our highest need areas in Boston Public Schools. And Alicia, who will be joining us in a few minutes, can give her own introduction, but she leads our parent organizing work in the Silicon Valley, which is where our first campaign focused on special education really started. And so we'll get into more details on that campaign specifically once Alicia hops on. So just a quick overview of what we'll engage in today. First, we'll share some of the key findings of our Advocate's Guide, and some of the major takeaways that have been really relevant to our parent advocates and the parent-led campaigns on the ground. And then Alicia will join us and share specifically how our campaign is taking shape in San Jose, what direction it's going, and how the research and the findings and the takeaways from this Advocate's Guide are sort of powering our parents on the ground as they push for changes in the system. And then we will save time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions as they come up throughout, feel free to add those into the chat box. Otherwise, we'll open it up at the end as well. And in the interest of making it a little interactive, there will be a few points throughout that I ask you to actually add in some comments or some reactions, or do a quick poll into that chat box. So please have that open and please generously participate, because this is new work for us as well, and there's a lot of folks who are on this call now coming at it from different angles. So we're excited to learn from the different perspectives of folks on the call, and hopefully build relationships as we continue to deepen our work within special education and within parent organizing specifically around special education issues. So quick background on who we are at Innovate. We are a California-based nonprofit that works directly with parents to advocate for excellent schools for all students. and particularly students who have been left behind for far too long, low-income students, students of color, and students with disabilities. Some background on how we came into the special education work specifically. We were working with a group of parents whose children have disabilities, and were concerned about the low quality education their kids were getting. We started looking into the data within the Bay Area and within San Jose specifically, and it really showed that very few schools and districts were adequately serving these students. So we began to partner with these parents, and it was really through that partnership that we launched this new Advocates Guide for Transforming Special Education with that parent advocate audience in mind. So just some background, some folks who RSVP'd to the call. Like I said, there's a lot of expertise on the phone right now. A number of these folks were also either consulted or partners with us as we actually developed the content in the Advocates Guide. In particular, folks from National Center for Learning Disabilities and TNTP and Eye to Eye and other organizations either supported us through the development of this, or now as we're launching it and trying to get it to the widest audience possible, they've been partners in that launch. So we're really grateful for their thought partnership and the really practical partnership of getting the word out now that it's out into the world. So some background on the problem, on the size and scope of the challenge ahead of us within special education. Of the 6.6 million students with disabilities in U.S. public schools, by 8th grade, only 8% are actually prepared to read and do math at grade level. And we know early on those gaps that appear in elementary school and middle school only widen as time goes on if strong interventions and strong supports are not put in place. We see just 66% of students with disabilities nationally are graduating on time in 4 years. And then ultimately their postgraduate outcomes are also very low. Less than 50% of those graduates are fully employed 2 years after finishing with the K-12 system. So as our team started to dig into organizing within special education and supporting parents of students with disabilities, we've started to encounter unique challenges specific to community organizing in this new context. Innovate has been organizing parents in the Bay Area for years, and it's deeply rooted in a longstanding tradition of organizing through the PICO model. And we found that special education is unique given, one, just how tremendously complex the system is, how many different entities there are involved in delivering high quality special ed. And additionally, the nature of the system often silos parents. It separates parents into their own individual struggle, really advocating for their own child, trying to help them navigate through what is a deeply broken system. And really our approach is trying to bridge those silos, connect parents together with a real focus on collective action. We work with our parent leaders to think, not just about their own child and their own child's experience, but really to think holistically about the system and be change agents more broadly in the system. And be actual decision makers and leaders in working with schools and districts and policymakers on pushing for changes that will make a difference for their kids. So it was through this work, in particular with our parent leader group in San Jose, that we began to do the research for our Advocates Guide. Innovate, we have a unique organizational structure in that we bring together researchers and community organizers and education practitioners, former school leaders, all under one organization. And so we really draw on the expertise of all of those different fields to support our parent leaders in their campaigns and produce the research products that they need to drive their campaigns forward. And so that's really at the heart of the Advocates Guide that we are launching today. And I'll be walking through sort of how it's structured and what sort of resources are found within, in hopes that this is relevant to the efforts on the ground from folks on this call. So really, we want this to be a practice-based tool. We take complicated research and data and really distill it down for a parent audience in mind. So trying to leave the education jargon behind, and really drive home the point that what the research and the highest performing schools for students with disabilities have found as what truly works for students with disabilities, and help parents see very concretely, a vision for hope. What can actually take place when schools and districts put students with disabilities at the center instead of at the margins. And it does this through concrete examples and interviews with school leaders and teachers, school spotlights and profiles that really show what high quality special education can look like. And additionally, it is an advocacy tool. So it highlights the concrete look-fors and questions that parents can and should be asking to really diagnose the overall quality of their special education system and move toward more collective action. And so that's really our focus, is this system level change, and what we're hoping this guide is really pushing parents toward. I do want to point out it is available online at innovatepublicschools.org/special education. And in fact, it would be great if folks could actually go there now and download that report. There'll be a couple moments on the call where we ask you to sort of scroll through the pages and engage with it so that you can start to get oriented to how it's structured. So if you can go to the website and scroll down, you can download it. You can either scroll through the pages on the website or download a PDF. Toward the bottom, there's download the PDF. And for those folks on the call who also work with Spanish-speaking communities, we do have the entire guide translated in Spanish, so that's also downloadable on our website. Great. So first and foremost, we designed the guide with this parent leader audience in mind. Our parent leaders kept coming back to us with two key questions. First, they wanted to know, how can I advocate for my own child and help him or her get the support that he or she needs? And second, how do I know truly what high quality special education looks like? What is truly possible for kids with disabilities so that I can advocate for that at a district level? And while we found lots of amazing organizations doing work to address that first question about navigating the system and getting resources, what was missing was a guide that describes really what does true north look like for a special education system. And that's really the need that our Advocates Guide seeks to fill, is what can a parent actually expect from their school or district? And so to answer this question, we developed the guide in a way that paints a really clear picture with research and case studies and interviews about what this looks like in practice when we put students at the center. And again, this is meant to be an advocacy tool. So each chapter really highlights, it has this 2-page spread. So if you have the PDF open on your computer, you can scroll through. At the end of each of the 8 chapters, we have this 2-page advocacy tool called What Can Advocates Do Together, where it really highlights moving from the individual struggle to that collective struggle, what that takes and how parents can work together to really push their systems to deliver what their kids truly deserve. And so it's structured at the end of each chapter. You'll see a brightly colored page with the relevant look-fors that show up at the school or the district level to help parents diagnose and help them know what it is that they're exactly advocating for. We also highlight in a few different places throughout the guide our school spotlights. So we partnered in depth with two schools in particular out here in California who are getting just dramatically different results for kids with disabilities. So we looked at Kip Raíces, a low-income school in Los Angeles, where 90% of the students are low-income and Latino. And they are getting dramatically different results than the rest of the district, specifically for students with disabilities. Likewise, right here where I'm based in San Francisco, we visited Lafayette Elementary, which is a traditional district school, very diverse, both racially and socioeconomically. And again, this school is getting truly different outcomes for kids with disabilities, and really stands above the rest of the state and the district for how they're performing for this group of students. And so we spent time interviewing teachers and school leaders from these sites and visiting these sites, and have really threaded the work of those teachers and leaders and practitioners throughout all of the guide to help make it more concrete and more clear for our parents wanting to know what this looks like. So we've structured the guide around these 8 core principles. And we frame them in the first person to really help us keep the student perspective at the center. So as I read them aloud, I want you to think about which one of these really resonates with you and your own experience. Folks are coming at this from a lot of different angles. Folks bring their own personal experience to this as well as their sort of organizational, professional experience. So I'd love to ask for you to share in the chat in a moment, sort of which of these, just hearing the names, really stands out to you as resonating in particular. So we have believe in me, include me, find me, catch me when or before I fall, meet me where I am and challenge me, know me, involve me in my family, and stick with me. So these are the practices that the research that we found supports, that drives the work forward in the schools that we found to be true outliers that are getting outstanding results for kids with disabilities. So if you can, use the chat function, and if you could just drop into that, and I'd love to see kind of what really stands out for people, just hearing those titles without necessarily knowing all of the content that goes with it. Which one of those truly resonates with you? And Eleanor, I'm not sure if I'm able to see folks' chat. Is that, oh, here they are. Yep, they're popping up. Great. Great, so I'm seeing a lot of folks latching on to both believe in me and include me. And it was an intentional choice for us to really put those two first and foremost. I think just for me personally, both of those very much resonate with me. When I think about include me, I think about my former students. When I taught students with emotional behavioral disabilities, we were isolated in a small windowless classroom at the end of a very long hallway near the parking lot. We were physically separate from the rest of the school, and my students did not learn alongside their peers at any moment throughout the day. They rarely played sports or participated in extracurriculars or had friends who did not have disabilities. In one student in particular, I think of Chantel, who was incredibly sharp and witty and talkative, and had a very short fuse, but an incredible sense of humor. And Chantel did not find out until her junior year that she was actually on a special diploma track. And at that point, it was too late to take the necessary courses for her to earn a traditional diploma that would have more value out either in college or in career. And the diploma she was on was much more like a certificate of attendance instead of a true passport to future opportunities. So for me, that include me piece is incredibly important. So in a moment, I will walk through sort of each of these chapters and just highlight a few pieces of the research that really stuck out to us. And again, I know there's a lot of experts on the call. These practices will not sound novel to a lot of folks with deep special education experience. And really what we're trying to do is present the research in a way that is easily accessible for parents to understand, and to connect to these 8 practices and 8 principles, and use that research to really bolster their organizing efforts. So again, chapter 1, we put at the center of this, and some folks in the chat mentioned just how critical the expectation piece is for students with disabilities. Here we focus on the enormous belief gap that students with special needs must overcome to be truly successful. And we placed it at the front of the guide because we believe this chapter, Believe in Me, is fundamental to every single other chapter in the guide. And it's really threaded throughout. Research shows that the expectations that adults have for students play a predictive role in the outcomes that those students go on to achieve. And our beliefs about our students dictate what sort of opportunities we provide them. And so the power to provide or unfortunately deny rigorous content or high quality teachers or meaningful learning opportunities really hinges on what we believe that our students are capable of. I want to challenge the group here, and again ask you to use the chat, looking at these 3 sort of blank spaces for the statistics. Look at these 3 statements, and just from your gut, who do you think has the highest expectations for students with disabilities? Do you think it's students themselves? Do you think it's their parents or their teachers? And again, use that chat function of the webinar to vote. Do you think it's the students, their parents, or their teachers? And it looks like, so far anyway, a near unanimous vote for students. And, oh, I just shared too. Oops, there we go. We found 85% of students with disabilities believe that they would graduate high school with a diploma. That number dropped when we asked parents that same question. And I should say, sorry, this was not our own authentic research. This is looking through a US Department of Ed longitudinal study. 59% of parents expected their students with disability would graduate with a high school diploma. And then this is a slightly different question, but in order to graduate with that diploma, we know that students need to be mastering grade level content every step of the way throughout their K-12 education. And so when teachers were asked if they believe students with disabilities should be expected to meet the same standards as students without disabilities, just 12% of teachers actually believe that. And so we see this tremendous belief gap between what students want for themselves and what they believe is possible, and then what sort of beliefs adults around them actually have. In particular, adults and teachers and practitioners who are providing them with the opportunities that they need to be successful. So we knew this belief gap exists, and that students are sort of denied the opportunities they need every step of the way. And again, we looked into the research about how do you shift this? How do you actually change expectations within schools and districts? And we highlight examples of school systems where both at the district level, at the school board level, down to the school leader level, and teachers really take steps to put students with disabilities at the center, to set concrete goals for the performance of students with disabilities, and provide teachers with the supports that they need to actually change teacher behavior, and rigorously interrogate some of the biases that are connected to what we provide or what we don't provide students with disabilities. And the research shows that when you focus on teacher actions and teacher behavior, and really leave the door open to what students can truly do, teachers are often surprised at what students are capable of, both with and without disabilities. We found school and district leaders play a powerful role in pushing teachers to reach higher. We found in districts in New York and Florida and Hawaii, where at the district level, leaders set those goals to increase either achievement levels or graduation rates. And these district-wide goals and task forces and plans put the most vulnerable students first to create a sense of shared responsibility for the outcomes, instead of a sort of marginalized, isolated sense of responsibility for this particular group of students. And absolutely setting goals like this do not guarantee improvement, but it is certainly a good place to start. And this belief gap that we see between what students believe and what their teachers believe they're capable of, is particularly powerful when you look at what researchers estimate based on how students with disabilities are distributed across different categories and the severity of disabilities. The general consensus is researchers estimate that most, up to 80% of disabilities are relatively mild to moderate, and those students can meet the same academic standards as other students when they're given the right support. So how do we get there? Chapter 2 zooms in on inclusion practices. And while the notion of inclusion is reinforced by the IDEA Act, and the emphasis on placing students in the least restrictive environment, in California, for example, just 53% of students with disabilities are actually fully included. This data point here, this graph shows, it's a GIF, so give it a moment to show up. It shows, regardless of the disability category, regardless of how severe those disabilities are, graduation outcomes are double, and in some cases triple, that when those students are actually fully included in the classroom. And so we found this as really powerful evidence for pushing for what we're already observing in some of the schools that are really getting dramatically different results. And we found that this is true, as this graph shows, for graduation rates, and it's true that the similar pattern holds true for proficiency rates as well in English and math. So not only is the end outcome of graduation rates higher, but also every step along the way, we see higher academic performance for students when inclusive practices are employed in a really intentional and deliberate way. And so again, I'll move quickly since most folks on this call are relatively familiar with these practices. But again, we highlight it for a non-expert audience, really showing what inclusion can look like and unpacking what it takes to make it happen. We know that inclusion is not just throwing students with disabilities into a 40-student gen ed class. And we know that it takes intentional planning and collaboration between teachers and time built into the schedule to do that. And at the district level, there are huge budget implications for this as well that need to be thoughtfully addressed. So we walk our parent audience through what this actually looks like when it's done well, and what it takes to really pull that off at a school and at a district level. Oh. Chapter 3 zooms in on Find Me. This looks at special education identification processes. And this was by far, as I'm sure most folks on this call can appreciate, the most challenging chapter for us to develop. because the research on over-identification and under-identification and how these phenomena intersect with race and gender and class is both inconclusive and sometimes conflicting. And it depends on which disability category you're looking at. It depends on the district. And yet identification, we know, is one of the most pivotal factors in determining a child's trajectory. So we focus here on what some of those best practices look like to avoid both over and under identification and the devastating consequences either one of those can have. And this is bolstered by the Child Find mandate as part of the IDEA Act. And it really pushes back on the traditional, what we call the wait to fail approach, that typically requires students to demonstrate years and years of delay or struggle before they can get the services that they need. And instead, it really works to advance a vision that focuses on early intervention, universal screening, and what it takes to build those systems at a school or a district level to ensure that all students, whether they have a disability or not, are really getting the support that they need. Chapter 4, Catch Me When or Before I Fall. This is very closely tied to Find Me and how students are identified, but this really looks at the instructional practices. It focuses on both instruction and intervention, and it shows how, as one Covina Valley Unified District here in California, one special ed administrator put it, special education is not a placement, it's a service. So at the core of this chapter is really the need to focus on student learning and disability status with a growth mindset rather than a fixed one. And it really explores RTI practices, response to intervention, multi-tiered systems of support for a non-expert audience. So again, sort of demystifying that education jargon and really focused on helping parents understand what it looks like when students are flexibly moving between different levels of more intensive support, and really how that's connected to getting support for all students, and to proper identification practices. Chapter 5, Meet Me Where I Am and Challenge Me. This zooms in on the delicate balance that teachers must walk when it comes to really any struggling student with or without a disability. And that is, how do we meet our students where they are while still pushing them beyond where they are and challenging them and truly believing that they can achieve at high levels. So this chapter looks at the brain science and the research on brain development that supports universal design for learning. And again, shares that with a parent audience, helping them understand, what it means not to just teach to the middle, but to create really deliberate lesson plans and assessment tools that are really accessible for the widest range of students without necessarily watering down the content and just making it easier. And again, this is deeply tied to that chapter 1, the belief gap that we already highlighted. Chapter 6, Know Me, and I'll move quickly here. So I see my colleague Alicia has joined. Know Me highlights a core problem that many special education systems have encountered, and that is oftentimes there's nothing individualized about the individualized education plan. We see this in practice. This chapter pushes for a vision of special education services that go much more beyond just compliance, and really focuses on the true quality of services. And it looks at how some really innovative schools are using data and tracking systems and building really strong human relationships with students to get a more holistic understanding of student strengths and growth areas and build that into the IEP process. Chapter 7 is near and dear to our hearts at Innovate as a really parent-focused organization. Involve Me and My Family. And this chapter highlights ways in which schools build in clear processes to put students and families in the driver's seat. How do they look at parents as true co-leaders in their child's education? And how do they truly involve the student at every step of the process, especially as that student is getting older and passing through the K-12 system? How are they building independence and self-advocacy and autonomy? And then lastly, chapter 8 is slightly different. Chapter 8, we titled Stick With Me. And this takes a slightly different approach than the previous 7 chapters. It really focuses on special education teachers. We know that teachers have a tremendous impact on their students. And that impact is even more powerful on students with disabilities who already have the deck stacked against them for so many other reasons. And this means we need systems and policies in place that support those teachers and really support high quality special education workforce. 90% of high poverty schools report a shortage of highly qualified special education teachers. In Boston Public Schools, where I managed teacher recruitment, while we had hundreds of applications sometimes for one general education position, we still struggled to staff our special education classrooms across the school district. And so Stick With Me really looks at a systems level and thinks about how do advocates understand how complex these challenges are for schools and systems to really attract and support and retain the high quality teachers that are necessary to implement so many of these changes. So again, just to sort of recap here, you see these 8 different practices. And what you'll notice at the end of each of those chapters, those of you who have the Advocate's Guide, the PDF open on your computer, and I can actually, those of you who see me on video, at the end of each chapter, you can see these 2-page guides. So this is at the end of chapter 3, at the end of chapter 4. These walk parent advocates through very concrete look-fors. What does this practice look like when it's happening to a high degree of quality? How can you use this as a tool to really diagnose? Is this happening? Do we see evidence of it at a school level or a district level? And if not, what are the right questions we should be asking as a team of parents, really pushing for better services and better outcomes for our kids? So again, those 2-page guides are really the crux of connecting what is otherwise research and case studies, but really trying to translate that into action. And so with that, I think that's a great transition over to my colleague Alicia, who leads our community organizing work in the Silicon Valley and is deeply connected to our parent leaders on the ground who've been really using the guide and pushing for some of the changes that it calls for.
Thanks, Thomas. Hello, everyone. Great to be joining you all. Again, my name is Alicia Ross. I'm the Director of Organizing for Silicon Valley for Innovate, and I've been on the team for about 3 years. And I've been doing community organizing work for about 15 years now. And I am excited that Innovate has kind of embarked on this new chapter in our organizing work around special education. And you'll see on the screen there is kind of a really brief overview of the organizing model that we use. And really just, probably Thomas had mentioned this, but foundationally Innovate really believes that the folks closest to the problem really need to be driving solutions, especially when it comes to education reform efforts. So we are really serious about how do we help parents become effective leaders and advocates in their community, engage other parents, and build strategic campaigns and just get involved civically over time so that they can keep advocating for improving their schools on multiple levels. And we, as organizers on my team, we work really closely every day with parents to really train them about how to do leadership, how to do community organizing, how to understand these issues, use the tools and reports that we produced to better understand what's going on in their community, what are the root causes, and what are some of the potential solutions. So, Thomas, if you could advance the next slide for me. Waiting on that one, I think. Oh. Thomas, can you click it to the next one? I don't know. I'm not seeing it on my screen. It might be a little technical difficulty here. Everyone can bear with us.
Yep, just give me one moment. I'm not sure what the problem is. There, are you able to see it now?
Oh, yes, okay. Back in action here. Great, thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. So I think we invited folks to add to the chat. It would be interesting to hear if any folks on the call are engaging in community organizing or advocacy with parents around special education. If you wouldn't mind sort of adding to the chat if you are doing that kind of work. As you all may imagine, there are some unique sort of challenges and opportunities to organizing parents who are dealing with special education challenges with their students. And again, this was a new initiative for Innovate as we've initially started organizing around improving schools for low-income students of color. And we really started this work because we did have parents from San Jose Unified District come to us and say they really needed help, and that the work that they were doing kind of as individuals and the battles they were fighting legally, they just saw that that wasn't really adding up to any kind of systemic change at the district level, and they were really frustrated about that. So we were really excited to take on the issue, and it's still a learning process for us on how to effectively organize and what the issue cuts should best be for this issue. But it's been really exciting to see the potential that's there as well. So some of the challenges that we've seen in working with this unique subset of parents has obviously been some of the legal barriers that parents might have because of engaging in lawsuits that might prevent them from otherwise sharing their stories and experiences with the district in a public way, which is such a key piece of our organizing approach, is getting people to share kind of their pain and make it a public issue. So that's been a challenge since some parents have been sort of legally prevented from really being able to share it in a more public way. Another challenge has been the overall legal and compliance orientation that both parents and school district staff tend to have around this issue. So they tend to not see it as sort of a policy and political challenge and more as a legal or compliance related challenge. So we're trying to kind of work with both parents and district staff to sort of shift how they're thinking about this and realize that while the legal and compliance issues are of course very important, for us to get to an excellent special education system at a district level, there need to be some policy changes and there needs to be some strong kind of political support and strong political leadership to lead on those changes. Some of the other challenges have include just the complexity, again, of the problem, as I'm sure many of you are aware of, just the layers of bureaucracy and federal, state laws, how districts are implementing things locally. There's obviously multiple layers that make it challenging for parents to get their heads around sort of where do we start, how do we tackle it. And finally, obviously, different parents come to this work with students with different needs and at different levels of sort of frustration with the system and different disabilities that need different solutions. So there's a challenge in kind of finding the common ground amongst parents around how do we push for changes that we know will benefit, at least a majority of the students that we're advocating for. There's definitely some big opportunities in organizing in this issue area. As, again, many of you probably know, there's such a huge isolation experienced by families who are fighting their individual battles around getting their child what they need. And it's incredibly powerful for them to come together with other parents and share their story and find a supportive community, even while they're going through those individual battles. And for parents who maybe haven't engaged heavily yet but have concerns, they also feel like they're learning a lot and getting a lot of support from other parents in our group about how to tackle the system and how to approach even basic sort of things like scheduling an IEP meeting. And overall there is sort of this incredible opportunity for people to really feel like they're finding a voice, they're finding a sense of power in a system that often makes them feel pretty powerless. Another opportunity we have tapped into is that obviously this issue cuts across, race, class, ethnicity, and it creates an opportunity to build connections and alliances between parents who are often not connected in a district. So in our case, in San Jose Unified, there's a large more affluent white population, and there's a large low-income Latino population. And this has been a group of parents from both of those communities. And I think it's been powerful to sort of build some political alliances amongst those folks who are generally kind of divided politically within the district, and together to say, hey, we all need to tackle this. This affects kids in all of our communities. And it's also been obviously a surprise to the district to have to work with parents as a group instead of trying to sort of peel them off individually on their own individual issues. So it's been powerful to kind of bring that group together and sort of help the district see this as a larger, more systemic problem and not just an issue about an individual child getting their legal needs met or not met. Next slide, please. So yes, actually, I know I asked early on if you are doing any organizer or advocacy work, and thank you for folks. I see folks chiming in here, which I appreciate. If anyone else would like to add in anything about the issues that you're currently working on, and specifically, that would also be really great for the rest of us to hear and see. I see folks are working on getting resources to parents, special education, how to guide folks through different challenges. So thank you, that's super helpful. Next question, Thomas. So there you can see some of our awesome parent leaders. This was what we call a research meeting, which is basically a parent-driven, parent-led stakeholder meeting with an important stakeholder in the community to learn more about the issue, both the root causes and the potential solutions, and better understand kind of what are the political challenges that we would need to overcome. So this meeting we had was with our local state senator, Senator Jim Bell, who's been an advocate for students with special needs. And so we had a really powerful meeting with him and about 25 parent leaders about sort of his thoughts both on the local challenges that the district was facing and sort of what were potential state legislative opportunities coming up that we might want to weigh in on. And this is an example of sort of where we're at in the work. We have been continually building our base of parents and engaging new parents and training them and bringing them to the group. So we're still in that base building phase, and we have been starting to build allies and potential supporters of the work, like Senator Bell. We've been meeting with other county board members and superintendents, obviously local school board members, and other kind of nonprofit folks who work in the special education space, and all trying to help our parents understand the issues more, and again, build some more political alliances that could help us continue to put pressure on the district to do more and to look seriously at what's their long-term plan to really improve excellence in special education. The guide itself has been incredibly helpful in a couple different ways with our parents. And first, again, it really has helped our parents understand what excellence could look like and what their students really deserve and can achieve. And definitely some of the parents have shared with us, I really didn't know that my child could be mastering more of this content. It's helped them to talk to their principals, to advocate for their students in their IEP meetings. So even though those are not necessarily, this is not a guide about like how to get everything you need from an IEP, right? And there's great resources out there for that. I think this guide has just inspired parents to think more big picture about what's possible for their child and to have some hope that other schools really are doing practices and approaches that are helping maximize students' potential instead of just sort of merely going through some legal compliance kind of motions. And parents have used this to ask questions about their teachers, about what's going on in the classroom. And I think overall, again, it has helped parents think more systemically about this problem. So instead of just thinking about it as like, okay, how do I get X for my child in their IEP? They are starting to see, oh, wow, this is a bigger issue. There's all these layers. There's all these pieces that really need to be in place for the whole system to work well. And it's helped them to think and advocate kind of more on a bigger structural level. And we have used this guide when we've met with people like Senator Bell and some of the local school board members as well. And when you do meet with allies, public official allies who care about this issue, but often don't know much about it themselves, this guide is a really helpful tool for them to start to get more oriented and educated to what could excellence look like? What should the bar really be for our schools and our districts? And so it's been really helpful to have our parent leaders first studying and getting training on the guide, and then in these meetings with public officials, actually, able to share the guide, able to walk the public official through it, able to tell them, hey, these are some of the things we'd really like to see. Would you be interested in working with us on this long term, supporting this vision of excellence? And we've had a really positive response from the public officials we have met with, who have been really excited to have a resource that helps them also navigate a pretty thorny issue. And finally, the guide does help parents when we're asking, school board members and district staff sort of where we're at. It really gives them a better sense of, okay, here's how much the district is thinking about inclusion. Here's how much the district is focusing on, how they are finding and identifying students with disabilities. So it's been a really helpful guide for getting parents sort of a measuring stick to some degree in those conversations. And then we've continued to, like I said, engage other parents through house meetings, and we had a educational forum of about 100 parents in May where we shared both the testimonies of parents and their experiences, and we presented this guide information so that more families would understand what excellence could look like. And it was a great leadership development opportunity for our parents. And long term, next year, we would really like to have a large community forum where we would be asking our public officials, local school board members, and some of the county folks and other allies to say, hey, let's all commit to work together on some of these issues. Let's visit some of these high-performing schools for students with disabilities. Let's set some clear goals around accountability for our district for performance for these students. And we're also looking at how do we really push our district and support our district to do more around inclusion, which locally our district is struggling with. And finally, we're also considering, again, with an eye to state legislation, are there some ways for us to weigh in potentially on some state funding debates around special education and some broader reforms that our parent leaders are excited about? So that's just kind of a quick overview of our work on special education right now. And we're also sharing some of the guide and some of this work with our other regions, but really the primary focus for us is San Jose right now. But however, we are really excited about reaching out to organizations to continue a conversation around organizing parents around this issue. So we actually have a couple opportunities if people are interested. First of all, we are open to having a follow-up call with folks who would like to dig into some of the organizing work. And if there is interest, we would love to have that call probably in the next month or so, led by Corey Simpson, who's our National Organizing Director. So if you are, sorry, I might have had the lights go out on me in here, potentially interested in that, if you could also just chime into the chat bar, that would help us get a sense of whether we should do a follow-up call, and we can reach out to folks who participated on this webinar, invite folks to join us for that. And then in addition, Innovate has 2 training programs that are to support parent leaders learning this organizing work around education, just more broadly, special education and other issues. And we also have an organizer training program. So we have, both of those are led by Corey Timpson. And so we have 2 parent leader institutes each year, one in LA and one in the Bay. You can see the dates for those coming up. So if you do have some parents that you're working with that you would like to get a really powerful experience of kind of the concrete steps of community organizing, and also sort of this bigger orientation of becoming an effective leader in their community, it's a really inspiring 3-day weekend where they get to come in contact with parents from, a whole bunch of places in the Bay and across the country. And we have some of the some trainers who've been doing this work for 30, 40 years, who are really effective at motivating families and helping them get fired up to come back to your organization and build the work. And then we do have a 9-month community organizer training program that is focused on how do you train young community organizers to really dive into these issues and build teams of parents who are working together on these campaigns. So we're hoping to engage some of you, hopefully, in some of those programs and conversations long term if you're interested. And thanks for chiming in. I see some folks chiming in saying they are interested, so that's great. So I think that wraps up my section, and I believe we're opening it up to questions for Thomas around the guide or myself around the organizing for our last couple of minutes here.
Yeah, so thank you both, Alicia and Thomas, for an incredible presentation. This guy seems amazing, and it's really great to hear about the community organizing work that you all are doing. We have folks chiming in with questions. We have just about 2 minutes left, and we unfortunately have a hard stop at 4. But so let's just get any quick questions that you all may have had during the presentation that you felt like you didn't really get a chance to get it out there. Now would be the time. And for those of you that still need to noodle around and get those questions together, if it's okay with you, Alicia and Thomas, I can share your contact, your emails, and have folks follow up directly.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Great. And for everyone that attended, I had a lot of questions about would you be able to view this presentation. It will be recorded, so as soon as we finish up here, I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and I'll share it with you all, and then I'll have a follow-up thank you emails for everybody that joined, and I'll include a link to the webinar.
Great.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we're
Yeah, and since we're at time, just want to thank all the folks on the call. We really appreciate it. We're excited to see where this work goes, and are definitely interested in learning from you all and deeper partnerships. So please, we'll make sure you have our contact information, and we'll definitely be in touch for follow-up.
Yes, I echo that. Thank you, everyone. Really excited to keep building this movement of parents and educators trying to help transform the system. So great to join you all.
Great. All right, everyone. Thank you. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.